58 people were murdered and more than 500 were injured in the Las Vegas massacre last October. And now more than 1,000 survivors of the deadliest shooting in American history are being sued by MGM Resorts. The strange twist is sparking a major backlash. Is this heartless or practical or maybe both? Jonathan Hunt is live in our West Coast newsroom with the story. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Martha, it certainly seems odd on the face of it that the company would sue victims, but it's all about MGM protecting itself from what could potentially be a series of devastating financial claims. The company says it has, quote, no liability of any kind to defendants, those defendants being some of the hundreds of people who were shot, wounded, and traumatized that terrible night when a gunman opened fire from the Mandalay Bay. MGM cites a 2002 federal act that gives liability to protection to any company that uses, quote, anti-terrorism technology or services that can, quote, help prevent and respond to mass violence. MGM says it's protected from liability because it used a security company certified by the Department of Homeland Security. And in a statement, MGM added, quote, years of drawn-out litigation and hearings are not in the best interest of victims, the community, and those still healing. Now, the act MGM is relying on here was passed in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks. The FBI has not called the Vegas shootings an act of terrorism and, in fact, still hasn't found a motive behind the massacre. Victims and their lawyers are outraged.
This is the most reprehensible conduct by a defendant under circumstances like this I've ever witnessed in more than 30 years.
And they argue that as Stephen Paddock brought his huge arsenal of weapons into the Mandalay Bay, MGM should have seen the warning signs and should not be protected legally by that 2002 Federal Safety Act.
It wasn't meant to provide immunity for a hotel casino who's had woefully inefficient security process that didn't, all the bells and whistles that were going off that they didn't catch.
Now, the courts will decide the legal issues. The court of public opinion, Martha, seems to have ruled already against MGM.
That could be damaging as well. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Brian Claypool, an attorney who was there the night of the massacre. He represents more than 75 of the survivors. And Mark Eiglarsh, a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Gentlemen, welcome, both of you. Mark, you were there. We talked shortly after that night about how horrific it was for you. How does MGM turn lawsuits against these victims and get away with it?
Hey, Martha, thanks for having me back. Yeah, we talked right after the shooting, and I will tell you that the announcement of these lawsuits against the victims of the Vegas shooting has re-victimized and re-traumatized everybody that was part of that shooting, including myself. And my question to MGM is, how deep into this swamp do they want to go by suing victims? I mean, how low do they want to kick the victims? In my opinion, both as a victim of the shooting and a lawyer, and actually I'm co-counseling with Robert Eglet on these cases. I mean, this is a bullying tactic and an intimidation tactic, Martha, to dissuade or discourage these victims from filing this lawsuit, plain and simple. And they didn't have to do this.
Mark, I can understand if MGM thinks that, they can win this suit, but suing the victims, what are they suing them for?
A PR nightmare. I will not defend them on PR grounds at all. My heart goes out to the victims, and I can understand why Brian and the others are feeling angry. However, Brian, as a tremendous trial lawyer, knows that your job when you're defending someone is to do everything you possibly can to win. And in this particular case, they cite a statute that seems to be created for this very scenario. They didn't hire Justin Bieber's bodyguards or a couple of Hell's Angels. They hired a company that was certified by the Department of Homeland Security in the exact acts that are protected underneath this statute. I'm not sure how a judge doesn't grant this.
All right, but let me ask you this, because after this horrific night, we talked about the security that other casinos have in place in Las Vegas. And the Wynn Casino, as I remember, had some much tougher security in terms of what you can bring into those rooms and how long you can let them, no one enter your room for days and days. So if you can prove that, can you prove, Brian, that they were negligent because other resorts have handled it much better?
You can do that, and you can also, the way we're going to do it also is, for example, a couple weeks ago, there was evidence of 3 years ago, a convicted felon is in the hotel room at the Mandalay Bay with mass weapons. So we can use prior reports of crime at all the MGM casinos and try to get in evidence of other crime occurring on the property from other casinos to prove negligence. But one thing I want to respond to Mark with is I don't think this is not a slam dunk, because the spirit of this 2002 law, Martha, was to prevent terrorism. The definition of terrorism is violence for a political gain. This had nothing to do with terrorism. And the last point I want to make is,
but that's
even
not
if
accurate.
a judge,
Mark, last point.
Mark,
go ahead.
Even if a judge does say this is terrorism.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Let me finish.
Mark.
The definition of terrorism in this scenario is any unlawful act, and that's what this was, inside the United States, which it was, that causes mass destruction, injury, or other loss. It seems to fit exactly the definition, Brian, as much as I feel for you and your clients. Legally, the judge doesn't consider emotion and sympathy.
Mark, gentlemen, thank you.
Mark, you can't.
We got to leave it there. Thank you, guys. We'll pick it up. We'll stay on it. Good to see you both tonight. Thank you very much.